The Big Red Couch, a podcast about making role-playing games. A group of GMs and players draw ideas from the mystery box and bring their game pitches to you.
Good evening, listener, and welcome to episode 96 of The Big Red Couch. Here on the dark side of the planet, I'm Craig, and in the land of light,
it's Ben.
And our episode prompt for today comes to us, I believe, from Just Dave and the Thursday Gamers of Montreal, and is Lore Adepts.
It's been a bit of a brain rattler, this one. I've gone back a ways trying to figure out a compelling tale to wrap around this one, because it's a bit generic.
I also ended up going back a ways, but into more personal history.
Mm-hmm.
And just to clarify that I've got it right, that's L-O-R-E.
Yes.
Good. Because if it was the other one, I'd be rethinking this on the fly, and it rarely ends well.
No, but we have not misrepresented Lore Adopts like some sort of orphan lawyer kind of... like a Baker Street irregular, but, in gowns.
Somebody wandering up to the magistrate's desk. Please, sir, can I have some more?
Please, sir, I'd like to recuse myself. No. Okay, so that's getting...
Nice. I did do the please, sir, may I have some more in our workplace once.
You were asking for work, or...?
Yeah, it was a university bookshop. I was working in the inward goods and goods processing bit of it. Had run out of invoices to do, and was in a somewhat whimsical mood, so I wandered up with my empty inbox on my knees to the desk of the person who did these things and said, "Please, sir, I'd like some more." And he got right into it and just did the more bang, and then gave me some paperwork to do.
Oh, that's a better work story than the other one that you got from that place, which was about the that finding a particular textbook for somebody.
Oh yeah, yeah. Or horribly injuring my knee.
Yeah, true. Yeah. No, I recall the one where you go like, I need a textbook. I think it was blue and had a tiger on the front.
Oh yes, it'll be one of the 4,000 English second language titles.
Yep.
Yeah. That was the special hell day, that one.
Weirdly enough, that Yonan Vasquez put I'm looking for a book, I think it was blue. In one of those things. It was a couple of years later that I saw that and I was like, huh, okay. It's not just Craig's experience of that kind of thing.
Nope, really does happen.
It does. It's a world thing. Alright, so apart from tiny legal scamps and dangerously dyslexic book requesters, what have you got going on with the Lore Adepts?
Alright, this one involves a little bit... Well, the explanation for it involves a little bit of a traipse through my own memory lane, because for reasons that are not mine to tell, I was basically reminded of being in hospital as a child, and sort of realizing that an enormous amount of my memory of my childhood involves hospitals and medical centres, and I can still remember vividly exactly what the coffee vending machines at the Auckland Central Hospital waiting room looked like some 35 to 38 years ago. That's still very vividly in my mind. And just sort of thinking back on my own history, I have all these memories of medical stuff. And yet at the same time, I know it didn't actually take up that much of it. I had a few hospital stays. I had about 3 years running where I was hospitalised for a week or so each year, and a bunch of medical stuff. It wasn't actually that huge a part of my childhood. It's just that looking back on it from 35 plus years later, that's the stuff that sticks out.
That was memorable and mildly traumatic.
It was, yeah, pretty much, yeah. It's, if I really think about stuff and I think about, okay, well, this place, and try to drill in, yeah, I can remember the other stuff, but it's the medical stuff that kind of floats to the surface all the time.
And remember, folks, hospitals are creepy. And from personal experience, I can tell you that abandoned hospitals are creepier.
I can believe that, yes. I was about to go into a comparison between a couple of different New Zealand hospitals, and then realised that I believe that legally allows any fan of the show, should they run into me, to shoot me. So I'm not going to do that. Because nobody wants to hear that shit. Plus, I think one of them's been torn down now. Wasn't anything to do with me.
Right, no. It's probably standard
That
practice.
sandwich could have been put behind the radiator by anybody. Alright, so where I went with it is the idea that lore, in this case, is not just the great big tales and legends of a culture, but also the backstory of a person.
Mm-hmm.
Your recall of the past is rarely a perfect thing, and, like I was saying, even if you know your impressions of your own history are wrong, it doesn't mean they're not the thing you think of, and they affect how you do things. And so what I had the idea of with lore Adepts, because I was sort of got the lore and dusty old tomes and that kind of thing, and with Adepts I just jumped immediately to first edition Shadowrun when they brought in physical Adepts of magical punching people. And so I came up with the idea of, well, effectively, how do you punch somebody in the backstory?
Okay. That was a bit of a jump from personal mythology to somehow weaponizing that, but carry on.
Well, it's a bit of a mashup, but there's an episode. Yeah, this constitutes spoilers for the Flying Shark Christmas special of Doctor Who, Matt Smith era, just so that we know. In that episode, you basically got the Doctor interfering with somebody's history in order to turn them into the sort of person who will give enough of a shit to save the day. That's the sort of the driver of that plot. So I sort of had the idea that you've got the lore Adepts who are, you can possibly go with a read or die approach, that these are just very committed, scary librarians, or the group of sages that nobody ever really talks about, who solve problems, be they with a person or with an invading army, by removing the source of the problem. They change the story and the backstory and the legend or whatever of the person or organization or empire so that they no longer oppose them.
So, revisionist historians with a little bit more of a proactive bent.
Pretty much, yeah. And there's a line from Garak in Deep Space Nine of, a true victory is to make your opponent realize that they were wrong to oppose you in the first place. Except in this case, rather than convincing them, you're literally punching them in the motivations.
This is implicitly time travel, but possibly without the travel.
Yeah, you could do this with almost any time travel system would be reasonably easily hacked to do this, though whether they're actually time traveling or whether there's something else going on, realistically you're probably going to end up with a time travel metaphor. You could just as easily do this as a time travel game. It's just that rather than traveling in time to the actual history, they're traveling in time to the remembered history, a much weirder and fuzzier thing.
And it's effectively establishing an alternate reality. Cool idea, though I must balk a little bit at the fact that this resembles a certain skein of YouTube video, where people recontextualize or decontextualize history around certain political viewpoints for clicks and lulls.
I was not aware of this.
Yeah, it's a bit of a cottage industry, and there are some quasi-famous individuals, and I follow. I may be biased in this. No, I'm absolutely biased in this. I follow a small squadron of people whose entire life purpose appears to be to sit down and pick holes in the logical arguments of these people when they can find them. And yeah, it's a thing. It's largely, I mean, Alex Jones might be the most successful example because he's actually got a television show. But yeah,
that name rings a bell and does not have good mental associations.
Yeah, angry man sells you protein shakes and I don't know, stag antler scrapings and so forth to keep your vital essences pure. But that's Sorry, that's a small misgiving that I have with some of the connotations of your idea. Let's assume the players are good and wholesome, shall we?
That would be nice. Yeah, that'd be good.
I am not providing links for that shit. There's some funny stuff out there.
Yeah, we're not linking that shit.
Anywho, enough of that. So, squadrons of folks are looking to disincentivize or defeat enemies of their nation / ideology by means of changing the context and the remembered history of the world. Like I say, as you say, punching them in the narrative.
Pretty much, yeah. I think a lot of it would depend on what role you put these lore adepts in. I mean, if you went with a log horizon approach and have them as these sages who study the whole world, that's probably the safest and easiest and nicest way to go, because then their motivation presumably is going to be, well, let's stop people from screwing this up too badly.
Right.
If you go with the rather more partisan approach of these are a group of sages and scholars and whatever of one particular kingdom, that's a bit different.
Yes.
And presumably gets a bit nastier.
Well, it's an ideological approach. It's not, strictly speaking, any worse than, say, assassination, bloodshed, revolution, etc., which is pretty normal fare for role-playing games, to be honest. It's like, kill the evil king. Sure. I got a sword and a couple of days to spare. Yeah, that's pretty normal. It's interesting that we find it irksome that doing that via changing the representation of history and so forth is somehow worse. But fair enough.
So that's where I went with that one.
Okay.
It is, as you say, it's more or less a time travel game, in that any system that can do a time travel game would be able to handle this without real problem.
Well, no greater problem than any other time travel game. And are there any time travel games? Oh, no, there is one, isn't there? The Chrono...
Well, I mean, aside from the entire Doctor Who Adventures in Time and Space...
Come on, Doctor Who is timey-wimey at best, and they...
Okay, it's a timey-wimey travel game. There's also Time Watch from Pelgrane, I believe.
Which has more mechanics about, creating paradoxes and stepping out of the time stream for a bit to do something and coming back.
It does let you do the Bill and Ted Bogus Journey and Excellent Adventure stuff.
Mm-hmm. Which it necessarily does. So, yeah, I'm just... If it's not time travel driven, in that circumstance, it's effectively like the Ministry of Truth, the role-playing game, which also makes me a little uncomfortable.
See, I was thinking more the Bibliomancers from that Jim Hines series. I will double check that, of people who are essentially doing magical shit using books.
Regardless of the talismans they use, the focuses and so forth, what are the impacts that they have? What do they change when they do a spell?
Well, it's mostly things like, hey, I'll reach into my copy of Star Wars and now I have a lightsaber.
Oh, right. That's handy.
Yeah. But the vibe of the thing, the using books, the more scholarly approach, I think a lot of it would come down to how you wrapped the trappings around things. Because it would be, if you were going with the whole, we are traipsing through a culture or an empire or an individual person's story, it'd be nice if there was somebody there to oppose you.
Well, naturally there should be some conflict. That's important. Would there be, say, an opposing force of dark librarians who either want to keep the established status quo in place, or trying to resist you, or maybe even the Dewey Decimal System itself is resisting your attempts to alter history? That's a very Sapphire and Steel interpretation of time being a vast, unstoppable force kind of thing, but...
I was flashing to the episode of... Is that an episode of The Tick where a communist-themed supervillain starts off his rampage by destroying a statue of the guy who invented the horrifying capitalist Dewey Decimal System?
I don't recall that one, but that sounds like something that happened on the tick.
He had like huge shoulder pads with little minarets on them.
He's probably called Red Scare.
Probably.
Yeah, something like that. No, yeah, it's entirely possible. Not quite sure how Dewey Decimal System is capitalist specifically, but
Don't think he was either. He was reading from note cards.
right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta keep something in those shoulder pads. Yep. I think one of the things that you could do is maybe couch this as if you are working against a tyrannical force that uses this force for ill. Something like Torg with the no, not System Lords. That's bloody Stargate again. Basically, the invaders imposing their paradigms on the world, actually changing the axioms of operation. And this is slightly more subtle, where it changes attitudes and things that are intellectually, or things that seem to be possible, rather than actually turning people into lizard folk. Maybe that's the way to do it, and you could establish these are the bad guys. This is the line up to which they become bad guys. You can do things approaching that line of questionable morality, but until you start to get relatively close, you're probably okay.
Yes, the idea of sort of traipsing through a legend, as it were, and having arguments with the people involved of, that's not how it happened. Really? Are you sure that's not how it's happened?
I guess you could kind of go like a sort of Aesop's fables kind of thing, or maybe like there's a comic book called Epicurus the Sage, where the titular character lives through the era of both Greek history and Greek myth and legend. He's there when helps out with the negotiations between Pluto and Persephone. Yeah, when they're sorting out their time sharing arrangement and ongoing relationship. So, and other little fragments of mythological history, and he's kind of there contributing and basically being a bit of a smart ass.
Yeah.
And it brutally mashes up, there's like a 5-year-old Alexander the Great who's a murderous little shit, learning philosophy so he can become a great man someday, and various other characters make an appearance, and so it's a little whirlwind tour through that era of history with interjections by gods and so forth. But the idea that you establish your existing mythology, and then the players attempt to go and tweak things in it to have a happier result. That's an interesting one. And if you make the environment that kind of virtual one, where you aren't actually going back in time, but you're affecting the stories that help people understand the world, that's a bit different. Some of your effects are effectively retroactive, but it's not time travel.
No. It's, I grant you, a weird one, but that's just where I ended up.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay.
Should we drop in one of the Audient ones now? Or...
If you wish.
We've got one from Jason Gill about Canadian mind beams.
Alright, I can give that a read. Alright. Okay, from Jason Gill about on our episode Canadian Mind Beams, which was all the way back.
The 80s.
Ah, the 80s. Such a golden era. Back in, episode 87.
Oh, wow, okay, I was just making an era, like a calendar era piss take. I had no idea I was actually in the 80s. Well,
dude,
okay.
Yeah, no, dude, Canadian mind beams were big in the 80s. They were very, very new wave.
They never made it to New Zealand. Okay, nobody ever did.
Hey, no, they were bootleg.
Latex-injected dogfish never made it to New Zealand. Cheap pocket octopus.
Oh dear. Alright. From Jason. Okay, so I'm really late to the party with this, and my idea is pretty half-baked, but bear with me. A small group of Canadian lumberjacks, far from home in the remote forests of northern Alberta. The weather's just turned warm. Time for a nice campfire and some beers with friends outdoors. But after everyone's had a few, and the fire has started to die down, there's a strange flash of light and strange sounds from deep in the forest. Grabbing whatever they can from their pickup, our ragtag group of inebriated, plaid-clothed investigators head into the forest to investigate. A dim glow leads them deeper and deeper into the forest, until they come upon a remote, fenced-off compound, strangely abandoned. They're about to turn around when a second flash illuminates the compound, and knocks them flat. Getting up, disorientated and dizzy, or is it just the beer, they're able to make out the outline of a bunker leading underground to somewhere. Pressing on, they approach the heavily secured door, when they're jumped by a burly gentle person, a blazing red uniform and a snazzy hat. Curses! Mounties! Almost instinctively, one of the party bends to apologise. Sorry, sir, we were just camping. We saw a strange light. We were just curious what was out here, and we're hoping to get a better look. Mountie's expression seems strained for a brief second before relaxing. Oh well, my mistake. I thought you might have been ne'er-do-wells who wanted to establish this secret hidden CSIS research facility. You seem like nice folks. Maybe you'd like to have a look around. The party stares at the dumbfounded as they unlock the bunker's outer door and gesture in. Somehow you have stumbled across this strange kind of very polite persuasion. One might even call it Canadian mind beams. The objective of the game is for the party to venture into the depths of a secret CSIS research project and uncover the shocking secrets of Canadian mind beams, using their powers of politeness to get past security in a form of very gentle, soft-spoken mental combat. I have no particular system in mind for this, which almost certainly means that there would be it can happily default to some flavour of fate. Spoiler. The mind beams are probably caused by a secret, and actually very pleasant super weapon, buried deep in the complex, and it's up to our heroes to stop the rogue branch of the Canadian government from enacting its diabolical plan. Or not. I mean, that's pretty open-ended.
And I had commented, presumably this facility is out in the middle of nowhere because they knew that the politeness hospitality feedback loop would cause security breaches if it was ever found, and the off-site monitoring services are desperately calling for the lumberjacks to be arrested while being told that they seem like a nice bunch.
It does seem like a novelty scenario, very much predicated on the politeness of Canadians, but I read a game forward just this morning which told me that this Canadian fellow is way too Canadian for his own good, so I'm going to big him up in the forward of his own game.
Way too Canadian.
Yeah. It might not be the precise wording, but I'm going to...
No, fair enough. I'm actually wondering what happens if you take that scenario and... Oh god, no, that's a dreadful idea. Why did I think that? I'm just imagining replacing the lumberjacks in the scenario with a group of teenage superheroes using the masks system. So you've got people being terribly nice while interpersonal conflict occurs. I have no idea what happens. I'm sure it'd be hilarious. But setting that particular idiotic idea aside, yeah, this feels like a con scenario to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because that pitch alone is just brilliant, and I would sign up for that game.
If you were using Fate, you'd make the consequences all things like mildly irritated and a little bit strung out and so forth. So rather than having like devastating wounds or you know, having your spirit crushed or something, the consequences are all leading you to do something impolite. Maybe get a bit pushy rather than your normal set of implications.
I think whatever is at the centre of this facility has to be really awful. And not just in a sort of stereotypical Canada awful. Like it's a Tim Hortons that serves really shit coffee and stale donuts.
You're talking Cthulhu awful, kind of?
In that category. Yeah, it has to be actually really bad. But still, realistically, it needs to be bad, but comedy bad, which is a tricky road to follow.
It's something I've tried before, though never really gotten to the core of it. If you have an apparent problem being caused by very bad people who are doing strange things for, you know, unexplained reasons. They discover, they're doing these quite unpleasant things for a good reason, and the alternative is much worse. Bother.
So cabin in the woods kind of territory.
Yeah. It doesn't mean the screw you all option isn't available, but
yeah. Yes, I'm genuinely not sure what should be at the centre of that.
No, you are. You understand perfectly what's going to be at the centre of that. The Nickelback.
I don't know. I mean, quite aside from having referenced them in the Overdrive Factor episode, I mean, the temptation, if we're going with the Canada is really nice thing, is to assume that there is some malevolent entity in there that is only kept contained by surrounding it with enormous numbers of incredibly nice people. That this is the terrifying sacrifice that all Canadians must make.
Yes, that they know that if they falter, if they slip up, that the horror will be unleashed on the world. So, yeah, that could be the thing. Maybe the Nickelback is just a projection. The one time that everyone was a bit grumpy, it escaped.
Well, it's a way of bleeding off the worst of it.
Possibly. All right.
You know, that there is this thing that lurks underneath the surface of all Canadians, and there are only a few ways that it can get out. So there's hockey.
Yes.
Which I understand to be some sort of sport that doesn't involve fighting, but I'm unsure how that bit works.
The go-to joke is always, I was at a fight and a hockey match broke out.
And Justin Bieber and Nickelback, and these sort of exist to kind of bring back into people's minds that this is the consequence of not being nice. As it were, this is how they remind them. Right.
This is the somewhat sacrifice, somewhat
penance.
Yeah. The cautionary tale,
yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, to be fair, I actually quite like a number of Nickelback songs. It's just that New Zealand radio had a distressing tendency to play them to death. I mean, they did that with every other song as well, so...
Yeah, that is commercial radio for you. That's pretty much what they do.
Yeah. I always felt sorry for any sort of new New Zealand band who got a number one hit or any sort of airplay anywhere else in the world, because the New Zealand radio stations would pretty much guarantee that everybody hated them within about a fortnight.
Yes, I remember the summer of How Bizarre.
Ah, yes. The era of Renegade Fighter.
Yep.
At this point, we're just stacking up weird YouTube links, aren't we?
Let's
move on.
Yeah, we're good. Alrighty.
Alright, so yeah, con game, that would be hilarious. I don't know whether it should be a comedy eldritch horror, or just a full-blown eldritch horror hiding under there.
It depends how deeply anti-Canadian, as in the opposite of not being in opposition to, you wanted to go.
I think I got lost a few subordinate clauses ago, but let's run with that.
Fair enough. Okay.
I am liking the idea that if you sort of descend far enough down into this bunker, gravity starts working the other way, and you eventually come up into the hollow earth, at the centre of which is this malevolent thing, and that basically it turns out the Hellmouth is actually just somewhere out in the wilds of Canada.
Yeah. That would explain many things, I'm sure. Cool. Right, thank you, Jason, for the planned investigators of the subterranean dark secret of Canada's niceness.
Be a fantastic setup for, was it Hollow Earth expeditions? Alright. Did you want to do your lore adept idea?
Yep, I will do my lore adept notion. The idea of personal mythology and so forth is actually also resonant in my idea. I may have started bending your idea a little bit towards my one as well, but...
Remember, folks, you heard it from me first.
Yep.
He's ripping off my idea.
No, I was perverting your idea. That's completely different.
Strangely, that doesn't sound any better.
Nope, it should not.
In fact, one could argue it sounds worse.
Yes, it certainly should. The use of the word lore lately that I've been hearing a lot is people on the YouTubes, see, we're coming back to the YouTubes, talking about non-text or non-front-loaded stories in video games. Big open world crap like Skyrim and the like, where you'll find out stories and histories by talking to people, or the hundreds of books that are scattered around this apparently sort of only semi-literate culture. It's a bit of a puzzle, but there you go. And people taking these, interpreting them, and then repackaging stuff that people have found and putting it into videos and saying, oh, look at the things we found. It's got Skyrim in the title, even though this game is like 5 more years old now. Click on it, please. So, a lot of that is also people diving into the backstory of shows, particularly Steven Universe, I've found, because they've teased a crap load of stuff about everything, and has led people to go speculate insanely. And often what the speculation tends to tell you more about is the person doing the speculating more than the actual source, because you're trying to interpret what a team of writers often is trying to do based on what you've seen so far, but the extrapolations often really, really sort of you came to a point in your chain of inference, and you went hard left at this point, and it might have been sort of hanging together, but it really shows what you generally think of the universe and how it works at that stage. And it's interesting enough. I mean, if you're bored, you can watch stuff like that. Game of Thrones as well. People digging into Mr. Martin's previous works and deciding that Westeros is a post-nuclear wasteland that has recaptured sort of medieval technology, and explains all these other weird things from the previous civilization. Kinda.
Does it explain the seasons?
I don't see how it could, but I'm sure that this is where there's this loop of over-analysis and so forth, where the kinds of YouTube channels I was talking about before and things studying fictional history kind of seem to get in the same sort of thing. It's relatively harmless with the fictional histories. It's when you're talking about actual history in the same way, it's a little bit fucked up. So I was thinking about that. I also ran across a extensive video about the Polybius myth. Have you come across this at all?
No.
The story was in the early 80s in Portland, there was a weird video game, a cabinet in an arcade, with the name Polybius, and people were, rather than taking quarters from it, people were turning up and taking readings from it and data from of the players, and people were being affected with memory loss and seizures when they played it. And there was some sort of implication the FBI was involved, and so forth. It was and this is a straight up myth. The video that I watched today can track it back as far as the early 2000s, but no further. And there's implications that somebody has been ginned this up at some point in that early bright part of the century where the internet was practically anything would be read by anyone. The Northwest Forest tree octopi, things like that. There were lots of people.
Oh yes, the Pacific Northwest tree octopus.
Yeah, things like that.
Yeah.
Your basic internet shenanigans from the period. Which, in a YouTube video by Stuart Brown, who goes by the channel name Ahoy, who does lots of interesting retrospective things about video games and the Cold War and how they had a history. Some slightly lingering reviews of the weapons used in video games. They're a little bit. He's got some Barry White in the background. It's
hands where we can see them, son.
It's a little. He does kind of caress the idea of firearms a little bit in these things. It's just a wee bit weird, but it's cool. The videos themselves are very well made. The guy only puts them out really, and they're pretty cool. And that's something that I've heard the myth before, and it sounds pretty exciting. I've seen references in the background of things like The Simpsons and so forth, which is cool. And also I have an occasional a non-identifiable, non-serious medical condition that means that occasionally if I'm extremely tired, I just freaking pass out. And flashing lights and dark rooms apparently is not good to that, because they happened to me sometime in the early 90s when there were still video game arcades down in downtown Auckland. That's not the case anymore.
Ooh, yeah.
Bit the crap out of my tongue. And someone stole my bag, which is lovely. But otherwise I was.
At least you didn't catch any sort of notifiable disease off the carpet.
Yeah, that's fair.
Look for the silver lining, and that's possibly the only thing that saved you.
There were no other sorts of lining involved, I'm sure. So that's a thing of personal interest. I also remembered a YouTuber called VineSource did possibly completely hoaxed, but quite tantalizing thing where he goes to old MMOs and just sees what's left, basically. He'll see if he can find if there are any players or what state the game is in. And he went to something called Active Worlds and was being chatted to by something he thought was an NPC, but it started answering his questions and talking to him directly. and it's a little bit pants-wetting, even in the context of it being on a server somewhere else. So cute little things like that. And I was also reminded by the fact that in Dragon Quest the magic using colleges, which most people are mages. There are a few, you can play a non-mage if you want, but you're very specific fightery style. Almost all of them, I think almost all of them are referred to as Adepts of the College of Elemental Fire or something like that. Which is hilarious, because when you first start out, you have probably got a total of no ranks in any of your starting spells.
So the only thing you're adept at is maybe waving your hands around and having nothing happen.
Well, given that most spells will have like between a 10 to 40% chance of backfiring, depending on how carefully you take it. And the backfires are, anything from, it's a little more tiring than usual to you lose your entire memories for, D10 weeks. Adept doesn't seem quite accurate at that point.
Dude.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things about early adventures under that system with new characters were hilarious. It was a laugh a minute, Three Stooges kind of thing.
I do remember the tales of the kitten of Yog Sothoth, but this is perhaps not the time for that.
Indeed. Anywho.
So with that setup,
with that rambling preamble, the idea that, and this is actually a little bit Ready Player One, though I've not actually read the book, but I understand vaguely what the premise is, that the players knew a person who was deep into a game, an MMO, that had an amount of player-produced content that was relatively difficult and obscure to get to. You could create things in the world, and it wasn't the locked down carnival ride experience that some of them are. And something happened to them. They vanished, they maybe passed away, but there is some sort of legacy, something left behind, less like an inheritance or vast sums of money or something, but maybe an answer to a question, a secret that has gone undiscovered at this point. The characters in the game want to find out what that is. Possibly, and I would suggest that in definite sort of varying degrees of incentive, they either want to reconnect with this person that they've lost, or to solve this riddle, or possibly have some atom of revenge, or to beat them at the game that they've set up. So that they're playing this MMO, attempting to uncover this mystery. But there's a bit of a time clock on it, because the game will not be up forever. Eventually someone will notice that these servers are producing no money and drawing power, and eventually just shut them down. But the other wrinkle about it is that I'd make it a nice high level abstract system, so people are good at different sort of tasks, and you can abstract out being your character in the game being good at something. But part of the other approach is that you need to actually maintain a life. You have to live outside the game. You're doing a bit of a boss raid or something equivalent. The person who set this up is very elaborate and has left clues and stuff and put it in all the most inconvenient places. But part of it is not just defeating the monsters, it's managing to work together to your slightly varying ends and also not drive each other crazy. So I got the latest bundle of Holding, which had some more Powered by the Apocalypse games, including Headspace, which we've discussed before, which I'm reading through at the moment, and seems very interesting.
And Masks, which I want to have a better look at.
Headspace particularly has the idea of that's the cyberpunk shared consciousness thing, where people can borrow skills, but harm and stress and so forth carry over the group. It basically sits in a big chart in the middle of the table, and various things will make the group more. They'll increase their rage or their ego or their fear and affect the entire play experience. The idea that you're maybe throw in a bit of a Night Witch's kind of duty cycle thing, where the characters are going about their lives, dealing with shit, then in their downtime attempting to solve this totally obscure, opaque, did you ever see the book Masquerade by Kit Williams?
No, does not ring a bell.
Basically, it is a paper ARG. An artist called Kit Williams made basically a sculpture, which was like a hare, as in rabbity kind of hare, with like semi-precious gemstones, and buried it somewhere in England. He then published a book of art full of little clues as to where it was. It is insanely deep. Animals hidden in every panel, I think. There are little number square puzzles. There are literary allusions and poems and so forth. And it was reasonably famous in England in the early 80s. And yeah, it was a real massive thing where you people tried to figure out, based on the information in the book, so boil down the cryptography and all the clues in there to find this thing. It turned out, I think the person in question ended up, they found it had followed him and hadn't actually worked out the things, but possibly needed to lead up a bit more to that and maybe throw a few more false clues in. But yeah, he did that in another set of books, and it's a really niche kind of thing where you take a complex kind of pitch. He's quite a talented artist as well. So the book itself is beautiful in its own way. It's kind of like a baffling children's story. But yeah, that layer that that somebody, and hell of a marketing tool as well. It's like the idea that you could go and dig up and win buried treasure was the implicit thing. That's kind of the idea, the notion that you are trying to track down this person or the secret they've behind. But the things that are stopping you are not just their complete unwillingness to be forthcoming with this information, but also the stresses and strains of doing what might be effectively like a week-long boss raid and keeping yourself alive and employed and on speaking terms with people you love during this process. And, not murdering one another, because it's extremely stressful. That's the idea that you are. And lore adepts could refer to the game or something, that the world that you're going into.
Would make a fantastic name for some sort of fantasy MMORPG.
That's why that sprung to mind. And I would actually go for grungy. I wouldn't make this VR or anything more fancy than that. It's actually your sit down the keyboard game, but played through this fact that they're running around in this wasteland, massively outnumbered by the mobs in the world, having to deal with this in a relatively small party. But they're the only people who give a shit about the content that's left or was created. And they're following a breadcrumb trail through an entire virtual world to try and track down what happened.
It puts me in, or bits of it put me in mind, weirdly enough, of the episodes I saw of the TV show Digimon.
That's not unfair, yep.
Admittedly, I had a few questions about the show Digimon. I preferred it more to Pokemon because the monsters actually had personalities and
function
and a function and free will. But there was also the bit where they suddenly discovered that the big evil digital emperor was another student at their school, and so they're making these plans to defeat this guy. But nobody ever thought of, hey, why don't we just wait till we see him wandering around and then kick the shit out of him behind a 7-Eleven?
Give him such a wedgie that we win.
A little bit, yeah.
Fair enough. Yep, no, that's fair. And I've heard, I have no comparison even with the Pokemons and so forth. Though I have heard, again, people on YouTube. I watch too much YouTube. Has anyone figured that out yet?
I was noticing the YouTube-ness coming up a bit, but
but people do regard it highly, depending on the series, because that's always the way these things go.
Well, yeah, I have no idea which series I saw. It was just, there was a school, there was the Digital Emperor, there might have been something about metal rings.
Oh.
And the enslavement of Digimon.
So no, that's all fair. And yeah, so what's your feels about the whole making this virtual world experience also uncomfortably real from time to time?
I like it. I mean, I like the Night Witches type approach, because then you've got the ability for the real world to affect the game world and vice versa, without having to have it to have a direct connection.
There not being some magical neural link or something.
Yeah, there's no magical neural link. Your failures in the game world are not causing your relationship with your flatmates to break down.
It's your massive consumption of caffeine.
Yeah, your failures in the game world are what's making your relationship with your flatmates break down.
Yeah, it is
That's quite fun.
your fatigue, your neglect of various duties and hygiene. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it depends what it would. I think it would be slightly more touching if it was kind of like a grown adult responsibility kind of thing, where these people are maybe even convening remotely, but so they're not people who should normally be able to take a week off to play a video game, but because of the circumstance, and they may have done it in the past, but the circumstance they've got to go back to that place where you can never go back to try and figure this out before the time frame collapses.
Shades of, and I don't mean in the way it works, but more in the feel of the thing. Stephen King movie, possibly called Dreamwalker.
Don't recall that one, but it is a little bit, I guess, reminiscent of it, because the adults have to to confront what the kids experienced as well in that aspect. Maybe it's just a Stephen King thing.
I'll just check whether it was Dreamcatcher.
Ah, okay. Ah, it was a Stephen King thing. Man, they made a lot of his books into movies.
Yep.
Some of them have even worked.
Yeah, Dreamcatcher, which basically has... I mean, it's got a little bit of the Stand By Me nostalgia thing, but with rather more horror involved. And yeah, it's basically a group of adults who, as kids, had this kind of bonding experience, are drawn together once more. Shit gets weird.
Because it would.
Because it would.
Even if nothing supernatural happened, you can't go back, as the song says. I don't recall which song. But...
So, yeah, it would be interesting. I am in two minds as to whether to, if I was running it, to aim for the ending that is just kind of poignant, kind of a goodbye letter from whoever this person is. There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There is no buried treasure where X marks the spot. It's just a goodbye note.
Yeah, I think leaning on systems that allow the players to prompt what's going on would be important there. I think so. You get what feels to the group as being an appropriate outcome.
Yeah, because you could go the other way of, at the end of this quest is actually something important.
I think the idea would be to find the importance in it for the characters and figure that out between the players and the GM. The idea would be, somebody might, have resolved that finally he was going to crack one of these puzzles, and maybe manage it, but the expected thrill of victory isn't quite the same. Somebody felt that they could have done more to help this person and to do this last gesture to make sure that it wasn't lost. The thing that they had created wasn't lost to the world. So it would be, I think, the literal thing you find is not as important as the thing the characters get out of it, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely not a one-shot.
It would be a bit rushed. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
It wouldn't. I wouldn't make it. It wouldn't be a 5-year campaign kind of thing. But
oh, good God, no.
But definitely would need a little bit of time to stew, and to some degree it would be semi-ideal to make it. Well, if you can impose or constrain the way it's played, you might actually want to play it over like an 8-hour period or something like that to make it an extended session to mimic the grind and make people feel the burn, as it were. So rather than it's a bit dickish thing to impose on your game. It's like, play the game until your eyes bleed. But it might be one approach to get the whole, we're doing this thing, we're on a clock, everyone's starting to wear out a bit. You don't have to like that. That's an awful idea.
It makes it a very difficult game to run.
Oh yeah, to schedule or just logistically.
Yeah. First one, then the other. But I do like the idea.
Okay, cool.
Weirdly, I had the thought that, depending on how you wanted to approach it, if you wanted to do the sort of the one shot version of it, something like Pilgrims of the Flying Temple might not be a bad approach. Suitably modified.
The idea that you're trying to complete the letter, that request, yeah, that does have a bit of a fit to it.
And the deciding at the end what happens to your character, which way do they go.
Maybe make it slightly more tangible on game mechanics, but similar sort of mold. Yeah. I mean, the beauty and charm of Pilgrims of the Flying Temple is that you have 2 stats and it's in your name.
Well, yes.
You get stones of one colour or the other, and it's very compact, very clean and simple and like childlike, but not childish kind of experience. This one would be a little bit more verging on the grown-ups kind of experience.
Yes.
So that might undercut that a little bit. But yeah, you can add a little bit more complexity. Not much, I suspect, because we're dealing with... You don't want to actually have people going, my stat is this, and my PC's character in the game rolls to hit this. That would be just awful. But having them break down so they've got different sort of strategies, and they've got good recall of the lore within the game and the rules within the game and so forth.
Cool. Oh, yeah, I do like that idea. We had another suggestion from the audience. Actually, jumping back briefly to your idea, are all the player characters in the same, sort of accessing this game world from the same place or from vastly different places, do you think?
I don't know. It would depend. I think initially I thought they would be interacting via chat and so forth. It would change the dynamic up a bit. What's the thrust of your question there?
It was mostly a strange Iggy Pop music video that came to mind.
Okay.
Where the main crux of the music video is mostly this guy attempting to make a video phone call and keeps getting cut off.
Okay.
But the entire thing is this sort of destroyed industrial wasteland kind of vibe.
That's not unusual for Iggy's videos. I think
that is fair.
I think it was the video for Home. It was just Iggy in all of his gangly, sinewy glory, climbing around on a giant shopping cart in a giant alley.
This one, I think, may have involved a Citroen 2CV.
Oh, nice.
And some sort of VR rig. Oh, I just sort of suddenly had the thought that you had all these people who were sort of interacting with the same, no longer really running MMO, but the situation that they're accessing them from are just completely different. So you've got sort of suburbia, big city, somebody who for whatever reason is living completely off the grid in this half-demolished factory, and who looks kind of like somebody's shrink-wrapped a toast rack.
Yep.
It was just a thought that came to mind.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, that would be part of the setup and would have affect how things go. The having them split up would mean that the interacting with real life would be quite distinct. That's the problem. If you had everyone called back to one of the characters' basements, there would be more. If you were going to play that to the nines, the party breaking down just from the stress of this kind of epic quest could be part of it, and doing it face to face would make a bit more sense.
That is true. No, we also had a audience idea from TriggerHappy938. Okay, this one was for Tailor, Tinker, Soldier, Barista, and reads: So the talk of possession, paired with the talk of making it a high fantasy game, inflicted upon me a singularly horrible idea that I cannot shake, and am now inflicting on you. Thank you, Trigger Happy.
Yes.
Thank you straight to hell.
We won't forget this.
Take the idea of your group of high fantasy adventurers having blackouts, weird impulses, and inexplicable knowledge and abilities outside of their experience to its stupidest logical conclusion. That's our shtick. Come on.
Yep.
Stupidest logical conclusion. That is the Big Red Couch way. Maybe less on the logical...
Yeah, I was going to say something, but definitely the first and last.
Yeah. They are PCs in a tabletop game, and their players are really bad about staying in character. As a result, each of the characters has access to knowledge and skills related to their players' day-to-day life. Oh, those poor sons. Anyway, I'm thinking shades of the novel Mog by Ben Croshaw.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read it.
I have.
Okay.
It is basically a NPC in an MMO gains sentience and tries to do something about his plight. A lot of it hinges on the fact that he's undead, and he could probably it's kind of useful being undead.
Very low heating bills.
Yes.
The actual players will be playing the PCs, realizing they are being manipulated, at least in part, by these outside sources. From here, you can go in a couple of different directions. It could turn into a story of fictional constructs turning against the writers. The world starts turning more hostile the more the PCs go off script as the GM tries to railroad them back onto the scripted and ultimately pointless adventure. If you want to go really hard down the MOG route, have the PCs determine that death is the only escape and have the world bend over backwards to try to keep them alive and keep the game going.
Actually, that might have been the undead thing I was thinking of. The attempt to get out of this place. Yeah. Alright, keep going.
Alternatively, the plot could be that there is somehow some sort of threat that reaches across their bounds, and the PCs might have to establish communication with their players and work together to stop some sort of multi-dimensional danger. For this approach, I think having the danger be primarily on the player's side might be the most interesting take. This might involve running a game across two systems, something appropriately high fantasy pulp for adventurers like Pathfinder or Dungeon World, and something more grounded and low-powered for the mundane stuff. A low-powered GURPS build or Savage Worlds could do the trick. As a corollary, I think this setup almost demands that the player jobs and the PC classes mismatch as much as possible. The guy playing the barbarian has an inexplicable knack for figuring out weird technologies, as his tech support, Tinker, player goes through the same motions he goes through to get Agatha's workstation running again. The bard has an unusually solid grasp of how to tactically clear a room because he's played by a military vet. The possibilities are endless.
Okay, first thing I want to promise is that despite this being added to our Trello board sometime in July, I don't remember reading this, and despite it, that's crossover with my idea, it's definitely somewhat independent, though from the other direction. That is interesting. So, yeah, no, that's interesting. The other thing I'd like to say is I'd like to play the no cat noise about running two systems, especially if they are GURPS and D&D. That would just be fucking confusing, man. Well, yeah, if you can pull it off, but ow. Yeah, more power to you if you want to try something like that. But I'd probably err on the side of abstracting at least one of them. I've outlined what I would intend to do, but.
Captain, I am detecting large quantities of nope in this thing.
It would be. I'd be impressed. Put it that way. I would be impressed. But yeah, no, that's pretty. It's like, but like I say, it's very much along the lines of the same sort of thing I was thinking. And having read Mog though, I confess it didn't make as much impression on me as Jam. I like the writing style. Mr. Croshaw is pretty amusing, though it's not as fun as he used to be.
I haven't read either of them, but I have read John Scalzi's Red Shirts, which has a similar sort of idea going on.
But yes, the idea of players being badly played by other playing characters being played by other players, occasionally having to do dumb things, would be pretty funny.
It would be entertaining to adopt the process a bit like Better Angels does, where if you're playing the bard, the person next to you is playing the bard's player.
Yes, no, that's a really good call.
Because you can have some fun with that, particularly if you make it's the spatial arrangement that defines it, not the identity of the player. If you swap seats, the person playing the bard changed.
Oh no, that would be amusing. Also, if the other player goes AFK, BRB. Oh no, I can't move. Someone else.
I like the idea of. I'm just sort of thinking of the mechanics of running between the systems. I like the idea of some sort of mechanic that would enable the player to influence the PC. And if you assume that the game's going to exist kind of in two phases, that you've got the PC bit and you've got the player bit, and you're going to swap between them. I like the idea of the PCs are doing stuff, and then the player, so the Bard's player, can, I don't know, sort of fling their once per session, we go wildly off character token into the pot, and suddenly the Bard knows exactly how to clear this room.
And yeah, actually, rather than that going into a central thing, you'd actually pass it. You would have a player does something inexplicable token, but you'd pass it to the person playing the character.
Now that player has the token,
and they can't pass. They can't pass it back. They've got to go around. They've got to go around the circle. Maybe you have.
I like it.
Maybe you have tokens that go left and tokens that go right. So,
I think just if you just have it the whole thing of, it gets handed from player to PC.
Yeah.
But once the PC's used it, it's whoever is playing that PC is the next player.
Yep, maybe a talking stick.
I think that actually made sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually it's a talking stick to some degree.
Yeah, except you maybe have a few of them out there.
Yeah.
So you sort of give everybody one of them for each session. So you've potentially got a bunch of them in play, because we've all had those sessions where it just goes completely to hell.
There could be a couple of different things that maybe you need. Maybe you need, say, 2 or 3 tokens to do something really dramatic. Like, I disconnect for 2 minutes or something as one token, and so the character gets drawn around on autopilot doing whatever they want, but they get there's a single token out of it, something like that. So there's a different. That would be an interesting economy to discuss and build up. So that sounds like.
How are we going to get the barbarian into the middle of the city without anybody noticing them? The barbarian's player throws in the AFK token and then just comes back after they're already in there. How do they do it? Very well.
Yep.
Yes, how did the barbarian, being played by very standard first edition rules, not slaughter the entire Mage's College? We're really not sure.
No, that's actually that's an interesting, and I promise completely accidental synergy with the idea that I had. At least, but as I say, it's like in 2 different directions. That's pretty cool. Yay!
Yeah.
Thematically appropriate.
That is pretty damn cool. That's quite... I'm drawing a distinction here between comedy games and amusing games. This one wouldn't have to be a comedy game, but it strikes me that it's going to be really amusing to play.
By comedy game, do you mean a game in which you are funny, you do the funnies, rather than one
in which
situations
funny things
happen?
Well, yeah, a game I played at this year's Gen Con, which was effectively Suicide Squad in Candyland.
Yeah.
That I would classify as a funny game, because you've got a flying monkey, a Disney evil queen, Wile E. Coyote with his taxidermied roadrunner. That's inherently a funny game. Whereas an amusing game, the stuff that's happening in it might not actually be that much funny, that funny, but it's going to be kind of amusing to see what happens.
Ah, right. So the one that is fun and funny during the game, and you're encouraged to be comedic, which let's call comedy. But there is the one that you would like to see play out, despite it possibly being horrible.
Yes, and actually the example I'd go with, again from that same Gen Con, would be, yes, the Quags Candyland Has Fallen game would be the comedy game. The Eclipse Phase game with the title of Xenovore is the other one, because the stuff that's happening in that game was absolutely horrible.
Right.
But it was really funny watching it happen.
Right. Fair enough.
This guy's been infected with something? Yeah, I'll totally go in there to see what's going on here.
I think this might be a strongly influenced by your perspective, but okay.
Well, yes.
I'm not certain it's a super useful distinction, but it's certainly a personal.
Yes.
It's certainly a personal position. I don't know if I can categorize how you'd categorize that. It's maybe how you categorize an experience, which is fair. That's fair. Cool. Alrighty, so those are a bunch of ideas that somehow got out of my brain. And other people's brains too. Yay!
We'll round them up, I'll get the net.
Being as we are super organised and we probably want to make sure we have a topic for next time, don't we?
Alright, do you want to just ferret around in the box of mystery and haul out a card?
The box of misery, yes.
The box of misery. While that's going on, I'd just like to give a bit of a shout out to the folks on the Fear the Boot forums who had some fun and quite thought-provoking thoughts as to what could be done for next Gen Con on the Big Red Couch line. Sort of what we could do, or I could do at Gen Con to do something a bit more interesting than, well, here's my Gen Con, what I did on my holds.
The very most recent Fear the Boot episode was very much was it John and Little Sexy, I think is the guy's handle was.
Who I think used to be on the Trapcast.
That's what I understood too. We're at Gen Con and they're discussing how the bar for being organised and getting your shit together and being able to turn up is a little bit more prompt. But they are talking about making it an official thing and doing their and getting their social medias together and doing a bit more of a Fear the Boot thing. So hey, catch up with those guys for as long as you can stand them. I'm sure they're lovely actually, but
I suspect they are. I mean,
it's a thing. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I don't really know how that how to phrase that any better, but yes, there were some very good suggestions from Taz and Kitamono, some of which were repeating sort of some earlier ideas that did have me researching what booth costs at Gen Con were at 4 in the morning.
Great idea, definitely.
Yes. See what can be figured out, because it would be nice to do a little bit more at Gen Con
than play games and take up space?
Than just sort of doing a... Yeah. It was quite fun doing little YouTube-y things, so maybe something along those lines.
Yeah, cool. And on the topic of next week's topic, I've just flipped over the pile, and I'm going to go with this one. Because it is, my life is essentially the tale of Juan Bobo, only dumber. Which is cool. From Will Myers.
Okay. The tale of Juan Bobo?
That is what I am choosing to read from the card.
Alright.
Yep. Alright, so ready for next week.
Thank you, Will. And yeah, can you ping me a link? Ping me a picture of that card when you take one, because yes,
you'd like to verify this for yourself. It's understandable. All right. Thanks for the contributions for our listeners, and thank you for everyone for listening in while we burble about video games and YouTube and unspeakable things found therein.
And what lurks at the heart of Canada, and indeed in the heart of every Canadian.
Yes. It is known. Alright. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Want to hear more of our shenanigans? Then go to hoarde.net and click on the button that looks like a couch. The Big Red Couch is released under Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 3.0 Unported from CreativeCommons.org. All music on the show comes from the album Universal Fluff Theory by Krakatoa. Visit them at krakatoa.com or follow the link from our page. See you next time!